Miami is set to begin a 6-game road trip that has huge implications on how the season will shape up. Can the Heat find a way to respond before it's too late? We take a deeper dive on Miami's season so far and what could happen next as we address the state of the Heat on today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. Whether you're tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg, editor at allyoucanheat.com, here with David Ramil. Both of us are credentialed media members who cover the Heat every day. Got a jam-packed show for you today, including the best and worst case scenarios for the Heat's upcoming 6-game trip. But first, your favorite podcast now has a newsletter introducing the Locked On Heat Daily Newsletter. One stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com and start your day with the all-new free Locked On Heat newsletter. Today's episode is also brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. So we're doing a little State of the Heat address here today. The Heat are 3-3. They rank 17th in offensive rating, 12th in defensive rating. They are still kind of hard to figure out, David. For one, the third quarter issues that we talked about after the Kings game continue to be a confusing problem. We could try to get to the bottom of that after we sort of had a night to sleep on it here. But in addition to that, the starting lineup has the second worst plus minus of any lineup that's logged at least 50 minutes this season. They're being outscored by 33 points total in their time on the court together so far this season. And their 3 wins this year have come against teams with a combined record of 7-14, and they haven't beaten a team with a winning record in the regular season since April 2nd. Which one of these issues is more pressing, more interesting that you want to talk about?
The ability to beat good teams, because that's really how you test your mettle in this league, is that you can pad your schedule as much as you like and your win-loss record by beating up on these poor teams, but the reality is when you're facing the stiffer competition, that's how you know what kind of team you are. And Miami has historically been a team that rises to that challenge, even during the Jimmy Butler era. I know a lot of people kind of look at, Miami over the last few seasons and maybe they've underperformed or maybe they've overachieved, however you want to look at it through whatever lens you want to view. But when it comes to facing good teams, they've usually done pretty well. They seem to respond. You could always count on at least facing a team like again, Monday, perfect setup for the Heat. They had a nice layoff after the trip to Mexico City. That was an easy blowout win. No concerns. You come back to Miami, you're facing a Kings team that's been on the road. Should have been perfectly set up for you to cruise to an easy victory. At least that's how it would have been like in years past. Not the case this time. So when you're going on a road trip like the one that Miami is going to, and you're going to be facing tougher competition, how do you respond? Because I don't know. I watch this team as much as anybody, and I have no idea how they're going to handle it. They have the capacity to beat any team in the league, and I still firmly believe that. They just don't. And so at some point, you have to say, well, maybe they don't have the ability to beat any team. I seem to be kind of, deluded in thinking that they're capable of doing so, but I've seen enough over the past few years to kind of buoy me and kind of carry my belief in what this group is capable of, but something just isn't clicking. And I don't know if we're talking about a change in the starting lineup. I don't know if we're going to be talking about something drastic, not a deal or anything like that, because I think it's still too early. You're 3-3, so it's a small sample, but we could come back from this road trip and all of a sudden be looking at this team going, well below 500. And that's not a place you want to be. And last year, you could look to injuries as a convenient excuse as to why they were so far below 500. It's like, oh, well, we've missed this player, we've missed that player, we've had all X number of different starting lineups. Miami's actually been one of the healthiest teams in the league so far. We just got news that one of Miami's upcoming road trip opponents, Denver Nuggets, is going to be without their second best player in Aaron Gordon for a number of weeks.
And are they already without Jamal Murray?
Yeah, Jamal Murray's been hurt. I mean, that team is struggling right now. You have a lot of injuries that are already affecting. Look at the Philadelphia 76ers. Look at other teams around the league. Like the Heat have been so lucky, and that they haven't been able to capitalize on that is just pretty damning on what this group has been capable of.
Yep. And this has been an issue for them last year too. This was a team that was 5-20 against teams with a top 10 point differential last season. In other words, they lost 15 of their 20 games against good teams last year. And like you said, you could pad your record by beating the Charlottes and the Detroits and the Washingtons, and you can get to the playoffs. And the Heat deserve a little bit of credit for at least beating the teams they're supposed to beat, which generally they do. But, even though they lost a couple at the end of last regular season, which hurt them, but whatever. But this has not been a team that has, at least in the regular season, made a habit out of beating the best teams in the NBA. They haven't been 5-20 bad like they were last year, but you even go back to the 2022-23 season, they were 14-15 against teams with the top 10 point differential. Right, and we know that they made that huge run in the in the playoffs to get to the finals, and they obviously beat the good teams then. But in the regular season, they were basically 500 against those teams, which isn't bad, but it's also not some sort of juggernaut either. The year before that, when they were the number one seed in the Eastern Conference, they got there by going 10-13 against teams with a top 10 point differential. This is, generally speaking, and this isn't breaking news here, a juggernaut regular season team. But I got to see it at some point before I believe. Otherwise, like you sort of said, it's just blind belief that this team could beat any team. Like, no, you can't operate that way. I'm sorry. Like, you can't just say, hey, it was 2023. They went from the play-in tournament all the way to the NBA Finals. I got to at least see a sample of it. I got to see it in front of me before I believe anything here. And it's been a while since I've seen it. Now, last year you can write off last regular season, and I do, as a season that never really felt like it ever started because injuries plagued that team from the very beginning. But to your point, it hasn't been the case this year. And that's what's so important about this upcoming trip is Wednesday night, you get Phoenix. That team looks good, man. You get Denver the next night. No matter what, Nikola Jokic is always going to be a problem. You get Minnesota the night after that. Like, there's an opportunity here to make a statement. We're only 6 games into this Heat season. None of this stuff, like everything that we're talking about, even with the weird third quarters and the problem with the starting lineup, all of this could be chalked up if you want. And I did some of the research this morning, David, and I can't figure it out. I'm almost like some of this is just small sample size theater. Some of this is just flipping a coin 20 times in a row and by happenstance getting tails all 20 times. Like, some of it's just freakish, weird stuff. You look back on the 3-point shooting in the third quarters, and they're bad. Like, they were 1 for 8 from 3-point range against the Kings. There was another one where they were 2 for 12 from 3-point range in the third quarter. And then other teams on the same side are just making all their shots. Again, 6 games is not enough of a sample to fully understand what the third quarter issue is. And it wouldn't shock me, David, if we got into the middle of this trip and the third quarter problem was gone and there was really no explanation why. Because I think some of it is just by chance. Although I'm sure, the Heat can't approach it that way. They got to try to figure out something to do here. But I really don't know what to make of the third quarter issues.
I'd be shocked. You might not be, but I would be, because it feels like this has been an ongoing problem. Maybe. It feels like it's been an ongoing problem for so long now. And I know, again, we kind of hinted at this yesterday. At first it was kind of just narrative based. It's like, oh, okay, third quarter. It was fun to kind of come up with something like that. But there is a reality to how this team underperforms in the third quarter. You laid out the statistics. They're elite in their point differential through first, second, and fourth quarters so far this season. It's just the third quarter that's been so problematic. So it's the defense. It's the lack of scoring. It's a combination. It's an effort. I don't know what it is. And I know a lot of people keep
stat that I want to show you here.
All right.
Maybe you can, enlighten the situation here a little bit. First quarter, Miami's 3-point shooting percentage by quarter. First quarter, 42%. That ranks 5th in the NBA in the first quarter. In the second quarter, they're shooting 41%. That ranks 5th in the NBA in the second quarter. In the fourth quarter, they're shooting 41.1% from 3-point range. That ranks 5th in the NBA. They are remarkably consistent in the first, second, and fourth quarter in shooting, basically shooting 41, 42% across those quarters and at relatively the same amount of volume. The third quarter,
oh, here we go.
For some reason, and I can't figure out why, because it's the exact same rotation pattern as the first quarter where they have their best 3-point shooting percentage. In the third quarter, they shoot 29.5%, which would rank 27th in the NBA. There's no reason for that. Like, that's not you're not more motivated to miss or make your jumpers. Like, I can't figure it out. And again, I went back and I watched a lot of these 3-pointers that they take, and they're open. They're ones that they usually make, and I can't figure out why they're not making them. That's why I can't rule out the fact that it's just this weird, crazy variance chance thing that just happens to level out over time. And I kind of think that's going to happen. I just don't know when it's going to happen.
Some people have pointed out, and I don't know, because at this point it's become somewhat apocryphal here. Is it the kind of ceremonies that they're running at halftime? Does it kind of break your focus a little bit? Does it take you out of your comfort zone? Does it just change your approach to the game when you've had these extended layoffs? They had one for Dwayne and his statue. They had one for the medal recognition night. They had one for Pat Riley and his court. Like, it does seem like they've done a lot this season to kind of just shoehorn these events at halftime, and they can't help. I'll tell you that much. I mean, I don't know if they're the sole responsibility.
I mean, the opponent has to deal with them too.
Quarter.
They're still sitting in their locker room,
I know.
I know. If the Heat are going cold after halftime, like, why wouldn't these other teams go cold after halftime? They're all sitting in the locker room for the same amount of time.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why it would affect one side or the other. Again, you're probably right in that it doesn't affect either, because it feels like, again, this has been something that's happened for years, and you can't just chalk up dedications and jersey retirements. And there have been a few of those as Miami continues to build this goodwill around the league, but I just don't think you can point to that as the sole reason why Miami has struggled.
All right, well, let's get into the 6-game trip here. What's the worst case scenario for the Heat on this upcoming trip, and then what could happen if the worst case scenario happens? We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by SKIMS. Guys, you ever feel like you could use a little boost in the bedroom? Well, you know what? It's time to stop worrying about your performance and get SKIMS, so you can feel confident knowing you can get hard and stay hard whenever you're in the mood. SKIMS is changing men's healthcare by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. SKIMS provides access to a range of doctor-trusted ED treatments like chewable hard mints and Viagra and Cialis, and their generics for up to 95% cheaper. The process is 100% online, so there's no need for uncomfortable doctor's visits. Just answer a series of questions on their site, and a medical provider will determine the right treatment option. If prescribed, your medication ships directly to you in discreet packaging for free. No insurance is needed, and one low price covers everything from treatments to ongoing care. With hundreds of thousands of trusted subscribers, SKIMS can help you find the ED option that works for you. So start your free online visit today at hims.com/lockedon. That's HIMS.com/lockedon for your personalized ED treatment options. That's hims.com/lockedon. The products mentioned are chewable compounded products which are not approved by or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate restrictions to apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription is required and price varies based on product and subscription plan. We'll be right back.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen of the day. The best way to support the show is to like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app. So the upcoming 6-game trip for the Miami Heat, it takes them to Phoenix on Wednesday night. Then they go to Denver, and then it's Minnesota, Detroit, and then 2 games in Indiana to wrap this trip up. But it doesn't get easier when they come home. They host the 76ers, who could have Joel Embiid and Paul George back at that point. The Dallas Mavericks with Luka Doncic, and then the Milwaukee Bucks, which they're a mess, but by then maybe they right the ship, and it's still Giannis, and it's still Damian Lillard, and it's on TNT, and knowing the Heat, they'll have a hard time with it. So by Thanksgiving, we're going to know whether or not this team is good enough or not to compete in the Eastern Conference. This is the stretch of the schedule that I've been pointing to before the preseason even started. It's playoff team after playoff team after playoff team. And like I said in the first segment, David, the Heat have not beaten a team with a winning record in a regular season game since April 2nd. That's a crazy stat for a team that considers itself a winner and a contender, a perennial contender. All they do is beat bad teams, and all they do is lose against teams with winning records. And some of these teams aren't just teams with winning records. Like, these are the Suns, who look like a contender in the Western Conference, the Denver Nuggets, who can't be ruled out even despite the injuries, the Timberwolves, who were in the Western Conference Finals last year, the 2 games against the Pacers, who were in the Eastern Conference Finals last year, the Mavericks, who were in the NBA Finals last year. This is a murderer's row of opponents here. And if the Heat can't buck this trend, and we'll just start with the road trip part of this, and they go to 1-5, if they go on 1-5 on this trip, because the Detroit Pistons are the only team with a losing record on this trip. If they drop to 1-5, they're going to fall. If they go 1-5 on this trip, they'll drop to 4-8 on the season. 4 games under 500. And by Thanksgiving, again, if they can't buck this trend and beat good teams, they could be 5, 6, 7 games under 500. So my question to you, that to me is the worst case scenario. It's Thanksgiving Day, and this team is 7 games under 500. Is the season basically over at 7 games? I know it feels like it's early in the year. 7 games is a lot of ground to cover. And if you're not beating good teams, it's even harder. That's an even harder hill to climb. So let's play this out hypothetically. Worst case scenario, you're 6, 7 games under 500 on Thanksgiving. Then what if you're the Miami Heat?
You start exploring options to shake up the roster substantially, because you're not going to be able to get a ton. Like, if one thing, it's the approach for the season was, let's wait and see. If we're healthy, if Jimmy's available, if Jimmy's out there and playing at 100%, then this team can win games. So far, that hasn't been the case. The team has been healthy. Yeah, they've missed a couple of games from Kevin Love, a couple of games from Jaime Jaquez, Duncan Robinson. That's not what's going to be affecting. Those guys are not the reason why Miami's record is what it is, nor their inability to beat good teams. So if you're looking at being, and I think, honestly, unless something miraculously happens over this road trip, I think they'll come back to Miami at 3-9. And I've been historically, as you well know, on the more optimistic end of this team. I just don't see how you go into any of those spots and come out with a victory. Like, even Detroit, Jaden Ivey has been playing fantastic. Cade Cunningham's been great. Those two are going to torch Miami's backcourt. And I just don't see any reason why you could go and think that you're going to go into Detroit and pencil in a win. Certainly not written in pen. Like, this Heat team can't go in there against any opponent and think that that's an easy victory. I know a lot of fans were looking even at the Mexico City game against Washington. That's a specifically bad team with the purpose of being bad. That's not on the same track as Detroit has, that right now they're trying to be better and they're being well coached by JB Bickerstaff, et cetera. No. Washington wants to be bad. And I know a lot of people thought, that's not an easy victory for Miami. It wound up being one, but I think that was more of a fluke than anything else. I don't know. You look at this team, and I think it's going to be realistic to think that they're going to be several games under 500 at that point. And you can't, as opposed to last year, look at injury as something that's going to change, that can save you, So right. I think you start exploring options. I don't know what those options entail. I don't know if you have a sit-down conversation with Jimmy Butler and Bertie Lee, his agent. I don't know if you have a talk with, Terry Rozier or some other team. I don't know if you start exploring other teams that maybe are struggling just as much, albeit whether it's Philadelphia or Milwaukee or whomever, and kind of look to see whether or not they might need a player on Miami's roster. But I think you have to have realistic conversations about going into the season with the hope that you can compete at a high level and that you can be healthy enough so that you can go on a deep run in the playoffs. If you are healthy enough and you can't win anyway, then what the hell's the point?
It's such a great point, because Jimmy Butler, you've gotten pretty much as we can ask for from Jimmy Butler, right? Like the Orlando game and the New York game were duds from Jimmy.
Yep.
But,
sure.
4 out of the 6 games to start the year, you got pretty decent Jimmy Butler games. And that's about as good as you can expect from Jimmy Butler at this stage in his career, right? Like, even if he's out there, we know he's going to take games off. Like, there's just going to be games where mentally he's not showing up. And that's been the Jimmy Butler thing for years now. So none of this should be surprising. Asking for anything more outside of actually just being on the court more often, I think you're going to be disappointed, right? And so far he's been on the court for all these games and all these preseason games. So I think this is as much as you can ask for from Jimmy Butler. And despite that, despite the good health with this team so far, despite the fact that we talked about, hey, the Heat need to fix their shot chart coming out of last year. They need to be better.
Yep.
They're attempting 38 three-pointers per game, and they're making 38% of their threes per game this season. That's 5th in the NBA. They are crushing it from three-point range. Tyler Hero has never been better, and despite all of this, they're still 3-3. They're still losing third quarters, and their starting lineup is still getting outscored. Now, one note on that starting lineup, most of the starting lineup's issues in terms of plus-minus are because of that third quarter. They're dragged down by that third quarter. You subtract the third quarter, they're still a negative. That starting five. It's just a slight negative. It's not one of the worst units in the league anymore. But you can't just simply take a quarter out of the equation. It doesn't work that way, especially when you're dealing with small sample sizes. You don't want to just make the sample even smaller and try to make some sort of judgment off of that. But clearly, that starting five isn't dominant. And if you want to be a contender, your starting five, look at Boston, look at Denver over the last few years, look at Minnesota last year, Dallas last year. Like, those starting fives win you games. Right? You can't rely on your bench to win you games. The NBA don't work that way. You need your best players to win you the games. So, I as much as everything's gone right, and the fact that the Heat are still where they are, and they just don't look like anything they don't look bad, right? They're 3-3. They don't look bad, but they don't look like a contender. And you're going up against a bunch of contenders on this trip, and when you come back home too, like, you're going up against a bunch of contenders between now and Thanksgiving. So the worst case scenario could absolutely play out. And if that does play out, you're absolutely right, David. You have to have a real sit down and a really tough conversation, at least within that front office, of, do we start looking at trading Jimmy Butler? Because I'm telling you, every headline right now that you see about Giannis out there during the Bucks, like, it'll be the same exact headlines if the Heat are 5, 6, 7 games under 500 on Thanksgiving. It's going to be the same exact. Rival front offices across the league are wondering when the Miami Heat are going to pull the plug on the Jimmy Butler era. That will, I promise you, be a headline.
You've already seen them. Golden State monitoring Jimmy Butler. Yeah.
Absolutely true. And so those teams are going to come out. Wait, Golden State looks good. They're going to say, hey, which one of these young players do you like? Like, we have 12, 13 guys who can play. Take 4 of them for Jimmy Butler, right? Like, that they could absolutely do that. And so that could definitely be a conversation. And then, maybe shaking up the rest of the roster. Look, maybe Milwaukee is still fumbling around. Maybe a Damian Lillard thing is out there at that point. We'll still monitor the Giannis situation, although you and I have our doubts of Miami's ability to pull something like that off. I don't know that there's a Terry Rozier deal out there. Like, look at the trade machine. Find me the team that wants Terry Rozier making $24 million a year for the next 2 years. That team's not out there.
It does not exist. No.
Yeah, and so
you have to include at least one young player, perhaps even a number of picks or something like that, just to move Terry Rozier.
Yeah, at this point. And then you can start screwing around with, like, okay, what can we get for Duncan Robinson? And what if you traded Nikola Jovic and Haywood Highsmith? Can you get something? It's like, none of that stuff is really going to move the needle. And as we know, this Heat front office only really tends to dabble in deals that do move the needle, right? They're not really trying to make lateral moves necessarily. So,
do you think it's time to change the starting lineup?
To what? Like, I've seen, like, maybe you put Haywood Highsmith out there, but he's clearly in the doghouse for some reason. Like, he's not even getting minutes. Like, we're not even talking about Haywood Highsmith starting.
Is Larson a better compliment? Is Larson a better compliment to Tyler Hero?
I don't think so. I hate to ask a second-round rookie to do that at this stage. And again, no, to me, if anything, you try Bam at power forward and just put Thomas Bryant or Kevin Love in that other front court spot at this point.
Khalil Ware, right, which everybody's clamoring for. But I guess, again, he hasn't been playing either for reasons that we can't. Was Eric Spoelstra asked about this beforehand? Because I know he wasn't going to be addressing it afterwards. But was he asked where Ware is, or the status of what Ware is?
No. And I think everybody just knows that, the deal on him was he was raw coming into the league. And I mean, it's not some anti-rookie thing. Pelle Larsson's playing. I just think he doesn't think Khalil Ware. But then again, like, if you're several games under 500, maybe it doesn't matter anymore. Maybe you say, like, let's just throw this guy into the fire and get him some minutes. I could totally see that. Hey, let's develop these young guys. Let's see if this Khalil Ware and Bam Adebayo thing can be lightning in a bottle for us. I could totally see that, but not right now. Maybe, if they struggle at the end of this trip. All right, best case scenario. We're going to talk about that next here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by
Built.
I forgot who it's brought to you. Yeah, that's right. I'm sorry. It's brought to you by Built. I know that. Yeah, because you know why I'm so distracted? Because you know what? Rent is coming up. You know how it is. It's really difficult. Sometimes you just feel like you're stuck in the loop of rent payments, just watching your money vanish into thin air. It's time to turn that rent game around and start earning some serious rewards. And that's where Built Rewards comes in, because Built is breaking ground as a neighborhood rewards program that hooks you up with points on your rent. Every month, you pay your rent, and you just watch the Built points roll in. Use those points to jet off on a dream vacation. You can put your points toward a flight or hotel stay with 500 plus airlines and 700,000 plus hotels and properties. You can also use your points to book fitness studio classes, redeem them toward a future rent payment. They're designed to meet your lifestyle. So pay rent hassle-free through the Build Rewards app. Your rent game just got a major upgrade. Build points have been consistently ranked the highest value point currency by the Points Guy and Bankrate. So earn points by paying rent right now when you go to joinbuilt.com/LockedOnNBA. That's joinbilt.com/LockedOnNBA. Make sure to use that URL so they know we sent you. Joinbuilt.com/LockedOnNBA to start earning points with your rent payments today. Today's episode is also brought to you by Game Time and their new feature, Game Time Picks. That makes getting tickets to see your favorite events live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out all the fluff to show you only the incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Who wants to deal with that hassle? You get the impulse. You're just feeling that itch. You want to buy tickets for a comedy show, for a game. Who knows where that all of a sudden the urge strikes you. You don't want to have to deal with all that, so don't deal with it because Game Time Picks has you covered. Game Time Picks, exactly what you're looking for. Plus, they've got their all-in pricing feature, so you know exactly what you're paying right up front. No surprise fees at checkout, and you've got the great seat views through the app. You get a panoramic view of exactly where you're going to be sitting. So convenient. Trust me, you love Game Time. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA. You get $20 off your first purchase. Terms to apply. Create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA, and you get $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. We'll be right back.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. The best way to support the show is to like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app. Let us know in the comments section, what do you think happens if the Miami Heat are several games under 500 by Thanksgiving? But let's get off the worst case scenario. Let's get back to the best case scenario. And I just want to remind you of a little thing that happened last year, David. The Heat started the season 3-4. And then they went on a stretch of playing 9 of 10 games on the road. And we were kind of talking about that as the same way we were talking about this stretch. This is make or break. And if the Heat come out of this 9 of 10 game on the road stretch under several games under 500, that might be it for the season. And they go on the road and they go 7-3 over that stretch, and essentially turn their season around. Now, they struggled at different parts of the year and all these things. They had to go on another big win streak. There was another big losing streak later in the year. But that stretch saved the early part of their season. There is no question about that. This team is capable of doing remarkable things. We saw it during that stretch last year. We saw it in the 2023 playoffs. You just never know. And as much as you and I don't anticipate that happening, I wouldn't be necessarily shocked if they somehow went into Phoenix, Denver, Minnesota, and just rattled off a bunch of wins and just played their best basketball in about a calendar year. Like, it shouldn't shock anybody considering what we've seen from this Miami Heat team. But what would it take to do that? Because as you and I discussed, we've gotten good Jimmy Butler for the most part. We've gotten the best maybe ever version of Tyler Hero. The team is making a bunch of their 3-pointers. I think 2 things would have to happen. Bam plays to the level of his competition, which I expect to happen. He's one of the best 3 or 4 centers in the NBA. I think what's happened so far this year is actually the anomaly. It's the outlier. At some point, he's just going to get back to ground level here. And then the third quarter issues, like I said, just for somehow, some way, shape, or form, they're solved, they go away, whatever it might be. But if those third quarter issues go away and Bam plays more to the level of his competition, and it's going to be stiff competition here, right? Phoenix really stresses you out when they go small. Denver has Nikola Jokic. Minnesota has Rudy Gobert. Like, these are not easy opponents for Bam Adebayo to go up against. But if he could play like that and those third quarter issues sort of evaporate, then that's how the best case scenario kind of takes hold here.
Okay. I mean, I know there's an argument to be had. I just don't see the pathway. Like, I hear what you're saying. The third quarter issues go away. Yeah, but I don't trust this Miami team to be able to string 4 quarters of consistently good level of play. I just don't. What we've seen in third quarters, maybe it feels like an anomaly. That's fine. except that we have a year's worth or multiple years and seasons worth of a sample size to kind of see how they kind of take their foot off the gas when it comes to the third quarter.
They were closer to neutral on third quarters last year. It wasn't quite this bad.
Yeah, I mean, this has been as bad as it's possibly could be.
Yes,
that's fine. What you said, they were third worst alongside like actual lottery bound teams that are tanking with a reason, right? Washington and or Portland, I think, were the worst third quarter teams. Is that right?
Well,
and Miami was third worst.
Yeah, I mean,
in
if
terms
you go
of
by
point
net
differential.
Yeah, and if you go by net rating, they're the worst behind Utah and Portland. Yeah, so
Utah and Portland.
Literally, yeah.
That is not the company you want to keep if you're viewing yourself as a contender. And while you said yesterday's episode, they've been elite in the other three quarters, that doesn't matter. So you could solve the third quarter woes, but then what's going to happen? Is you're going to have a 17-point first quarter? Are you going to have a 17-point fourth quarter? I just look at this team and I'm not sure that they're going to string it together because I think that there are legitimate issues with that starting backcourt. I thought Terry was going to be able to resolve a lot of Miami's problems, but he's been a little inefficient offensively, and we knew that was going to be the case. But the defense, what we saw from them and him and Tyler specifically in the preseason, just hasn't worked out. They've been attacked. Nikola Jovic is not playing at a high enough level, I think, and his minutes have been kind of up and down. Like, we've seen nice minutes for him, and I think we all want to root for him because he's a young kid, and like, we love talking to him personally. He's always so optimistic. You could see his youth and his enthusiasm and how much it means to him to want to play for his country, to want to play for this team. And so you kind of root for him. Like, you'd have to be a soulless person not to. But at some point you have to kind of just say, you know what, he might not be the answer in this team. I don't think Miami has the answer on this roster because, again, the other option is moving Bam down to the 4 and then maybe sliding somebody into the center position. I don't know that we're going to see that. I don't know that that's realistic. We haven't seen Kevin Love. He's going to be out against Phoenix. Thomas Bryant, I don't know if you want to play Bryant and Bam together.
No.
I don't know. I don't know what the answers are, and I don't think anybody else does. And I think that's partly why Miami is in the conundrum they do. Like, maybe it sounds a little too dire considering they're at 500. But given what they're going to be facing over the next 9 games, we could be back here in almost a month and looking at a 3-12 record, or a 4-11 record.
I mean, we could, but you look at the advanced stats in the third quarter, like, what's the problem here, right? Like, the rebounding isn't great, but it's not terrible, right? Like, they're not turning the ball over a bunch. It's not like an issue of this team is just like sloppy with the ball. Like, their turnovers are right about where they are. They're still stealing the ball as much as they are in any other quarter, right? They're still averaging 2 steals per third quarter, which is about where they've been per quarter, and that's a fundamental part of how the Heat want to win games this year. They're shooting 33.9% in the third quarter. That's just make or miss stuff, man. That's all that is. It's make or miss stuff. And I just think there's a lot of noise in it.
What are they giving up? What is the opponent's percentage in the third quarter? Because it's probably closer to 45, I would say.
I'll tell you right now. It is.
Yeah.
But their defensive rating is bad. I think Jimmy talked about this after the games. Yeah, opponents are shooting 51.6% overall.
52% in the third quarter against
But Jimmy
Miami.
talked about this afterwards. He said, they start missing shots and they're a little bit less connected on defense. And sure. I think that's what it is. But you start making shots and all of a sudden you're playing in the half court a little bit more. And I think that defense kind of fixes itself because this is a solid defensive team in the other 3 quarters. And I really do think this is just a matter of getting tails 20 straight times on the flip of a coin. Like, I think that's what is going on here. Because I can't figure out the other reason. There's no other reason. Like, the weird halftime stuff doesn't make any sense. Like, there's no other reason that makes sense other than this is just weird. And I've rewatched these games. There's nothing that stands out, right? And you can't blame the rotation. It's the same exact rotation in the first quarter. And they're awesome in the first quarter. And this, I think there's a good team somewhere in here. I really do believe that, right? Like, if you subtract the third quarter, this is a team that is outscoring its opponents by 9.8 points per game. That's behind the Thunder, the Cavs, the Celtics, and the Warriors, right? That's it. That's the only teams that are behind there. Now, I know it doesn't exactly work that way, but it's why are they so good in these other quarters? It's so bad in this third quarter. It fundamentally doesn't make sense. And so I think this is going to be something that we're looking back on a month from now and being like, that was weird. and things level off. Now, at the same time, I think you're going to see leveling off in these other quarters too. They're probably not going to shoot as well as they've shot across the other quarters either. There's going to be other things that factor in. There will be injuries at some point that drag this team down. Like other things will level this stuff off, but the third quarter I think is going to be something that goes away over time. The issue is if it doesn't go away right away, then we're still dealing with the same problem where you're 5, 6, 7 games under 500. Like whatever this issue is, and now the Heat are clearly in their head. They've admitted as much. If this doesn't go away right away, then you have a problem. But this Heat team has talked about going on the road and having that be useful for them. It kind of gets them out of their head. It gets them away from home. It kind of puts them in the boot camp and so forth, and they kind of work their way out of it. And that's what's so strange about this team. So
I hear they're having Kevin Durant and Devin Booker medal appreciation night on Wednesday. So
are they really
another halftime show, especially with a 9:00 tip too?
Are you making that up?
Yeah, I totally. Yeah,
okay.
I just thought it would be hilarious.
Totally, it's plausible. Like
I can imagine. Yeah, I know it would be with Eric Spoelstra there and Bam too. Like I mean, it would be 4 medalists.
Oh my God! What if every team in the league just started organizing like halftimes? Just something every time the Heat come to town.
Anthony Edwards in Minnesota. You got Niko Jokic in Denver. Like he medaled too. Like you know what? Let's just bring it out, everybody. Is it Canada medal? I can't remember. Did it get bronze? Jamal Murray could be out there.
Serbia got bronze. Remember that was.
Oh, that's right. Sorry, yeah, that's right.
No, but you could celebrate Canada like let's do it for Boxing Day or something. I don't know, just whenever that is.
Halftime celebrations galore every time. Miami just feels
Kelly Olynyk tribute. A Kelly Olynyk tribute to the 2021 season.
Every time they go, every time that halftime buzzer comes on, it's like the cold sweats they break out in them, just knowing something's going to happen. Yeah.
So Jeff Van Gundy actually had this idea a couple of years ago where he was still in the broadcast booth, and he said, if I were a head coach in the NBA, I wouldn't even go into the locker room at halftime anymore. I would just stay out there and shoot around. Which there's a lot of reasons why you can't do that because there's halftime ceremony. But the Heat at home at least have the practice court. Just go up to the practice court and just keep playing. Just do a quick scrimmage during halftime.
Don't even go to the bathroom. Just go straight up there and go back down. You're done.
That's it. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first. Oh, do we want to make a prediction? Or is that stupid?
I don't know. I go if you feel comfortable doing it. I'll let you go with it because honestly, I look at this team and like you said, you see a good team in there. I'd like to think that there's a good team in there. We've seen it in the past. I don't know. 0-6. I mean, of the 6 games that they're going to go, 0-6 is possible. 4-2 is possible.
I got 3-3, and coming out of this trip, knowing exactly as little as we do now.
Nice. They beat Phoenix, lose to Denver. That's got all these injuries, despite the fact that
they'll beat. I think. Well, Denver with the elevation, you still never know. The Heat struggle there. I think they win one of the Phoenix, Denver, Minnesota games. They beat Detroit, and then they split the Indiana series in Indiana. So you come out 3-3 is my prediction. Sure. But who knows? It would still give us as little answers as we have now. So it wouldn't really help anything. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app. We'll be back Wednesday night with a recap of that Phoenix Suns game.